Hello and welcome to Press TV's news analysis coming to you from Tehran. I'm Marzieh Hashimi. Thanks so much for joining us. As a 6-year-old memo has surfaced from the George W. Bush White House, perhaps more questions have been raised than have been answered. In the memo, State Department Counselor Philip Zelikow says that the techniques that the American-led forces use in Iraq and Afghanistan were torture according to international law and domestic law. So why hasn't former U.S. President George W. Bush, along with his British cohort, Tony Blair, been arrested and charged with war crimes? The following report contains graphic images. We'll be taking a look at these questions and a lot more on this news analysis.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
This is what George W. Bush has actually brought for these people: death and destruction. The former U.S. president and his top ally, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, still remain at large, despite committing massive crimes against humanity.
If we are right, as I believe with every fibre of instinct and conviction I have that we are, and we do not act, then we will have hesitated in the face of this menace when we should have given leadership. That is something history will not forgive.
The U.S. and Britain started the war in Afghanistan in 2001, a battle that continues today. 2 years later, Iraq was invaded on the pretext of possessing weapons of mass destruction. But those weapons were never found, making that decision one of the most unjustifiable ones in man's modern history. The wars have led to the deaths of over 1 million people and the detention and torture of many thousands. A senior U.S. official from the former Bush administration, in a secret memo in 2006, warned Washington that its torture techniques amount to war crimes, and officials involved could face life in prison under the Federal War Crimes Act. The report by Philip Zelikow that described Washington's cruel and inhumane acts of torture as breach of international and U.S. war crimes laws was rejected and destroyed by the former administration. However, no one talks about the killings of innocent men, women, and children, as if it's good to kill and only bad to torture. The authorization of the use of depleted uranium by U.S.-led forces was another hidden war against the Afghans and Iraqis. Generations after generations have been and will be affected. It has led to massive deaths, cancer, and ailments that have caused birth defects in both countries. Bush and Blair are among few world leaders that have been able to escape prosecution despite having committed horrendous crimes against humanity. Other violators of international law in modern history have either been forced to stand trial or have been executed. And the question remains for history to answer: why has the so-called free world let them get away with it?
Okay. All right. Well, let me switch over to Washington and welcome author and historian Mr. Webster Griffith Tarpley. Mr. Tarpley, your take. Now, Mr. Millett says that basically the United States is not responsible for any war crimes, had no intention of killing anyone in Iraq. And I guess according to what he's saying, the numbers really are not so substantial. Your take on that, Mr. Tarpley?
Well, I had to disagree with that. Just during the time of the so-called economic sanctions, right, during the 1990s, it's between 1 million and 1.5 million people died in Iraq with sanctions that extended to food. You may remember Madeleine Albright was asked, is that kind of a death toll worth it for democracy? And Madeleine Albright, today the head of the wonderful National Endowment for Democracy, the National Democratic Institute part, that brings you freedom and singing tomorrow. She said, yes, that death toll is worth it. Then, after the invasion in 2003, it's certainly another million to 1.5 million. So we're getting up to Second World War proportions. I think that the matter of intent is clear. The Nuremberg precedent is international conspiracy to launch aggressive war. And with Bush, Tony Blair, and some others, they fill the bill. So that would be the subject of some future Nuremberg prosecution. I wonder if you're interested in this question, how this came up, though, the problem of why the State Department is publishing this memo at the present time. This is obviously politically timed, right? Here in Washington, we're going to have, in Guantanamo concentration camp in Cuba, we're going to have the trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and a couple of others. They've all been waterboarded repeatedly, and this was clearly, everybody knew, violation of the Geneva Convention, a war crime. At the same time, we have some people now who want to separate their political careers from that. The State Department that chose to release this now is obviously interested in saying, oh, don't look at us. We're not part of waterboarding. We're not war criminals here at the State Department, although they are. Then we've got Philip Zelikow, who's the author of the memorandum, who was interviewed in the Guardian. Philip Zelikow is happy to be interviewed. I think he thinks he could either be Secretary of State or UN ambassador in a Romney administration coming up. So he wants you to be reminded that he's not part of this waterboarding war crimes clique.
Okay.
The time is now coming for this kangaroo court in Guantanamo Bay, which is politically motivated also because Obama wants to profile himself as tough on terrorism. That leaves us with people like Ashcroft, Gonzalez, Yu, Bybee, Haynes, Addington, many others who really are suspect of war crimes. We had the Garzon prosecution in Spain, which seems to have essentially broken down. And then there's Moreno Ocampo, but everybody knows Moreno Ocampo is a servant of the U.S. imperialism, and he'll never touch it.
Webster Tarpley, your
Yes.
take. We just have about 30 seconds.
The United States is a plutocracy or an oligarchy, and that ought to be clear. And the current American foreign policy is to sabotage economic development. Wherever there's a pipeline, be it in Burma, Myanmar, be it the TAPI, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, be it the Iran, Pakistan, India, or China, wherever there's peaceful economic development that involves access to oil and other raw materials, the U.S. is there with, I consider, a lunatic foreign policy of attempting to sabotage economic development, great projects, infrastructure, wherever they're found, with the idea that the U.S. Has to sabotage these things because the U.S. has nothing to contribute to them.
And just really quickly, Mr. Tarpley, Dr. Tarpley, do you think that we will see a day? So sorry. Do you think that we will see? Do you think that we will see George W. Bush and Tony Blair actually standing in a court for war crimes?
Yes.
Okay. And on that note, I'd like to thank all of our guests for being here. From Washington, author and historian Mr. Webster Griffith Tarpley. From London, journalist and commentator Mr. Richard Millett. And from New York International Action Center, Mr. Caleb Maupin. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, viewers, for being with us. Join us right here, same time, same place tomorrow for another close-up look at one of tomorrow's top headline stories. I'm Marzieh Hashimi, signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Thank you so much, and goodbye.